Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, August 22nd, 2021. We've got another great show for you this week. We've got members of the media, academia, and financial services standing by to analyze all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. So here we go. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. Well, let's kick off the show with a look at some of the latest legislative, regulatory, and litigation news. Joining me on the line, he is one half of the Legal Eagles. You know him also as Kevin Walsh, a principal with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Kevin, how are you?
Doing well, Jeff. It's always good to be on the show. It's a rainy day here in D.C., but talking with you is always a great way to brighten my morning.
Oh, that is so kind of you. And I should say that David has flown the coop for today, but I'm sure that we will manage just fine, and we look forward to his return to the program very shortly. Kevin, when you look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., I believe Congress may be on a bit of a break, but that doesn't mean that the regulatory apparatus doesn't continue working when it comes to benefits and retirement plans.
Yeah, so Congress is on recess still this upcoming week. The House will be coming back shortly. The Senate has a little bit longer recess. So this week, I think the key thing that we're going to focus on, or that I'm going to focus on, or you and I can focus on,
We collectively.
is what's going on over with the regulator. And we knew at the beginning of the year that the Employee Benefit Security Administration, which is the part of the Department of Labor that addresses retirement security, was going to have a busy year because they had signaled, pretty early on with President Biden issued an executive order that was focused on environmental, social, and governance investing. And we also knew that there was a lot going on in terms of, plan reporting that EBSA was going to have to really up the pace and try to get some stuff done by the fall. And they have. We've got an EBSA that now has two rules that are undergoing White House review. And that's the last stage before they become publicly available. So what's going on at the moment is we've got two rules that are going to be proposed rules. So listeners, there's going to be an opportunity to comment. If you like it, you can say, these are great. If you don't like them, there's an opportunity to say, here's how they should be fixed. But there's two rules that have been sent from the Labor Department over to the White House to get their sign off before they get, released publicly, before they have their grand premiere, their opening night.
Nice. So that was nice metaphor or simile.
Well, in the ERISA lawyer world, the release of a new rule, that's the equivalent of, a new Avengers movie.
There you go. And it's almost as entertaining. I'm sorry, Kevin. I took you way off track.
Well, always entertaining and frequently much longer. It can take longer than an Avengers trilogy to get through them. But the first of these relates to, plan reporting. So a couple years ago, we've been talking now for a while about the Secure Act. We're hoping that there's going to be more retirement legislation at some point. We've talked about some of the proposals that are out there. But one thing that the Secure Act did was it told the Labor Department, we'd like you to modernize plan reporting rules, particularly where there's groups of plans, particularly with respect to these new things called pooled employer plans. And the Labor Department was told, please do this quickly. Well, we're now in August of 2021, and this legislation was passed a few years ago, and the Labor Department now has a proposal over the White House that we expect to see probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, called Implement Secure Act and Related Revisions to Employee Benefit Plan Annual Reporting on the Form 5500. So Form 5500, as I've implied with this, it's that annual thing that plans have to file that gives kind of like an annual checkup that they provide to the Labor Department on kind of all aspects of plan administration, plan investments, et cetera. And so, this is going to be a big deal because we'll probably see this. There's going to be an opportunity to comment, and hopefully folks aren't overwhelmed by lots of boxes to check, lots of fields to enter that don't really add much value. But if they are, we have an opportunity to comment. The second rule that's over there is called prudence and loyalty in selecting plan investments and exercising shareholder rights. And this is likely a continuation of the ESG ping pong that you, David, and I have talked about so much. Um, where last year the Trump administration uh, issued rules related to ESG investing. They also issued a rule related to the exercise of proxies and shareholder rights. Um, they were viewed as trying to deter plan fiduciaries really from basing decisions on anything other than the economic interests of participants. Um, and now we've got a new proposal that the White House is looking at um, that revises that rulemaking, or that probably is going to make changes to that rulemaking. Now we haven't seen what's in it, but based on how this rule has changed from the Clinton administration to the Bush administration to the Obama administration to the Trump administration, um, I would expect that the Biden rule will look more like the Obama and Clinton rules than it does the Bush and Trump rules. So what that means is I wouldn't be surprised if we see, um, a greater suggestion that plan fiduciaries, in looking out for the long-term interests of participants' beneficiaries, can take ESG goals into account more frequently. Um, it's not that the Trump administration said they couldn't. It's just that there was a perception that they were putting a thumb on the scale against ESG.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe here there will be a perception that there's a thumb on the scale that, if there's a tie, you might want to take these considerations into account, but we'll have to see. I think this rule is probably going to be a little bit slower at getting out of the White House. I think we'll probably see this rule probably in maybe end of September,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I think we'll see the reporting rule probably the beginning of September.
Can I ask you a question? This is just me just thinking. So
Yeah,
this,
it's your program.
well, it is,
Any
but I
questions you
don't.
want?
Yeah, I guess I can, but I don't want to put you on the spot or ask you to ask you something that isn't appropriate. So it goes to the White House, and then when it gets to the White House, is there a group of people that looks at it, and can people still influence? And I say people, lobbyists and other people, can they still influence what is signed off on? No political process, no process is free from from politics. So what happens when is there a group of people that sit there and review this thing, and do they have long? I mean, you've been involved in, maybe not this, but you've involved in a lot of conversations. What happens kind of behind the scenes, or do you do you even
Well,
know?
so it's easier to engage with the regulator than it is to engage when it's under White House review. So within kind of the executive branch, at the top level, there's this group called the Office of Management and Budget,
Hmm.
and they're responsible essentially for making sure that rules are consistent with the administration's policy across the board. Because and this happens more frequently than I think we should hope happens, but they want to make sure largely that if the Labor Department's releasing a rule, then it's not going to be directly in conflict with an SEC rule. They want to make sure there's a coordination among agencies in rulemaking that doesn't always happen at the agency level. The other thing that the administration frequently likes to do is they want to make sure that they've got their econ people at OMB, and they like to kick the tires on what the economic impact of the rulemaking is going to be, because agencies can take a narrow view of their agenda, which is EBSA is charged with protecting the interests of retirees, participants, beneficiaries, but the White House, I think they've got more concerns of balancing those interests with the idea that we don't want to crater the American economy.
Well,
Um,
that's a good thought to have in mind, Kevin.
well, I mean, it's not that EBSA would crater it. It's just that their mission is more narrow than what the White House's mission is.
Yeah.
Um, so at this point, you've got kind of this agency within the White House that looks at the rulemaking. If you meet with them, and they do take meetings, they tend to be more listening sessions than interactive. But you do occasionally see folks meet with them to try to explain that the economic impact of what you're doing is either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. Typically, if you're meeting with OMB, your focus is on what the economic impact of the rule is going to be.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
there's an opportunity for change, but the greater opportunity for change is once the proposal's issued, there'll be a comment period, usually somewhere between 30 and 90 days. Um, and at that point, you can get your comments in, you can request meetings with the regulator.
And my other follow-up question to that is, in what percentage of these cases does the rule actually get? So you get a go through a comment period, and they does it get revised based on that rule, or is there often times where they say, okay, well, thanks for the information, but we're not going to really change anything, and good luck. I mean, what
So,
percent? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so the rule can't get published without the White House signing off on it. So if OMB doesn't like it,
Hmm.
it'll sit there or it'll get withdrawn. Um, Ultimately, we never see what goes over to OMB. We
Hmm.
only see what comes out after they've reviewed it. Um, and what we tend to see is there's a website that they have, and once a rule has passed through the White House, um, it'll say, you know, consistent with change,
Hmm.
or it'll say, I forget what they say for approved, but there are indications, there are ways to tell that the agency was asked to revisit certain aspects of rulemaking as a result of the more holistic executive review.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I mean, it's, I guess, how it really works versus, what Schoolhouse Rock and what we what we have learned over the years. Oftentimes, the practical is very different than the theoretical or the philosophical. So, I think it's very helpful to have this. So, would you, I guess, last question here is, would you expect, we've got the Labor Day holiday coming up, a lot going on with review. Sometime after Labor Day, you would expect this to be published and for comment and start the process for public comment.
Yeah, I would expect that, and I think sometime in September, we'll probably, or sometime September, October, we might see more rules go over to OMB for review. I know fiduciary has been a goal of the Labor Department for a while,
Hmm.
and so I think we could see a third rulemaking on the horizon.
Wow. Yeah, they're keeping. I think they're going to keep people like yourself very busy. They're going to keep fiduciaries very busy, and I think you have to be diligent and on guard and aware because rules change, and if you're not in the loop on these rules, you could make some mistakes that could actually cost you in a big way. So, Kevin, thanks as always for breaking it down for me. I think I'm of everyone in the audience. I think I'm probably the one who needs the biggest education. But I certainly appreciate you coming on the program, and we look forward to having you and David back again next week. And look forward to talking to you very soon.
Look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks,
Thanks.
listeners.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye bye. Welcome back. Now, time to talk tech, consumer products, and a lot more. Joining us on the line, he's the lead advisor, executive producer for Seven in Investing. We're talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the program again this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And look, we have to talk about this because it's a tech issue, it's a privacy issue, it's a security issue, a data breach for our friends at T-Mobile. What's the latest on this, Dan?
Yeah, this is depressing. So I just got back from a trade show. T-Mobile was an exhibitor at that trade show. I am a customer. It is a company I like very much. And about 8 million of their customers had some information released. But don't worry, Jeff, it's not important information. It is just their first and last name, date of birth, social security number, and driver's license or ID information. So nothing that relevant. You didn't get the name of their pets. You didn't get where they went to high school. Only all of their identifying information. No, here's the thing. This should be a problem. People should be screaming about this, but nobody cares anymore. If you remember back in 2013, Target had a data breach and it cost the CEO his job. Like it was absolutely a big deal. And now this is barely a news story. So what this says to me is we sort of accept that our data is not that safe, that it's going to be compromised. Look, I've been identity thefted. It's not a fun thing to have happen. But when this happened, it didn't even occur to me okay, maybe I was one of these people and I should worry about it. I'm not worried about it at all. I think we've become somewhat immune to concerns over this because it's just so common. We're not even mad at T-Mobile.
Yeah, Dan, I heard the sirens in the background where you are, and I immediately thought that somehow you were in on this T-Mobile thing. So hopefully they're not coming for you. Dan, what can we if you are a T-Mobile company, you are a customer. I'm a T-Mobile customer. My wife's a T-Mobile customer. What do we do? Can we do anything,
Well,
other than
here's the
change our
here's the
password
good
and
news.
username?
If we haven't heard from T-Mobile, then we weren't impacted. Because T-Mobile is notifying affected customers and giving them 2 years of free identity services through McAfee. I believe I already have free identity services through McAfee from somebody else's data breach because, again, this is so common. So the good news is T-Mobile's being proactive.
Hmm.
If you're a shareholder, I guess the better news is nobody cares. Um, and again, I'm not sure it's all that hard to get anybody's personal information right now. It does say to me, we need a better system. The system of social security numbers as identifying marks, maybe it just doesn't work. And in this day and age of technology and two-factor authentication, heck, I couldn't log into my Seven Investing account on the plane because I didn't have access to my phone, which has my Google Authenticator. Um, I think we need something better, and maybe we'll move towards a more secure and safe world. But there needs to be actual impact. This needs to be Jeff goes to use his credit card, and he can't use it because nefarious actor has charged up, whatever it is, and it's a real problem. If this is just some amorphous, maybe somebody has my data, I don't think anyone cares.
It's going to be interesting to see. Again, this is something where try to be vigilant, try to, obviously sign up for the McAfee uh, identity theft service if you are subject to a breach. I think like you, I have been subject to a breach. I think it was Verizon actually, and I have McAfee. I think I have it in perpetuity. Dan, let's shift gears because we're not going to solve that issue other than bringing it to light for people and making them a
Oh,
little
I
bit
had
more.
I had a solution, Jeff, but
All
I
right,
guess we'll cover that.
no, no,
We'll cover that next week.
no. What's the solution?
No,
Tell
I
me.
was kidding. I
Oh,
was kidding
okay.
completely. Nobody
Okay.
has a solution
There
here.
is no solution. The solution is don't identify yourself. The solution is don't use many services. That's the solution. Just be in a hole and, not don't do anything. Dan, let's talk about Amazon because I think there is a rumor, a report that they are thinking about heading into your local shopping mall. I don't know if I'm going to go to the local shopping mall, just what's happening with the Delta variant, but sounds like Amazon is.
So I've been a regular shopping mall customer, even through all of this, masks and all. But that being said, it's more likely they're headed to a strip mall. So Amazon, the news has come out that they're looking at creating department stores, and these would be stores focusing on top tier brands. But the part they're not saying that I think is the most important is they're going to be focusing on Amazon owned brands. One of the things I've talked a lot about with Amazon is they've created all sorts of owned and operated clothing brands, much like Target has done very successfully. The problem is when you go to Amazon, I'm not so sure you're buying bathing suits or underwear of a brand you've never heard of, you've never seen, just because Amazon owns it. So, in theory, if they launched department stores, and these are going to be about 30,000 square foot stores, so not the 100,000 square feet that your typical like Sears or J.C. Penney would
Hmm.
be, think of these as sort of like small format Kohl's style stores, probably like Kohl's in off mall locations. And these have a chance to take Amazon's brands, which have basically languished, and put them right out front and center. Look, I've said for many years that Amazon should buy Kohl's or Macy's because they need this sort of visual, storefront. And doing it on their own in a market where let's just say it's very favorable to negotiate retail space. This could be really smart for Amazon, and I almost think it's a no-brainer. They've done a really good job with physical stores. I don't know if you've been to an Amazon bookstore or an Amazon four-star store, but they're really excellent retail experiences. So I have every reason to believe Amazon will do department stores really, really well.
So if I'm a Kohl's or TJ Maxx or one of those companies, I guess I should be concerned.
Yeah, I would be upset if I was Kohl's. I'm an Amazon partner. I take Amazon returns. I don't understand. I still don't understand why there hasn't been a partnership between the two, where Kohl's has come out and said, our house brands are tired. We need to refresh them. They're already partners with Amazon. Why wouldn't Amazon say, hey, by the way, we have 30 brands you could put in your store? It seems like a no brainer. Amazon doesn't have to buy them, they could take a 20% investment. And that would be a pretty big deal for Amazon's footprint. For its retail ability to do same day delivery is based on that footprint. They're using all of their physical locations, whether they be distribution centers or Whole Foods locations. So I still think this might be a precursor, a way to get Kohl's to the table. But yeah, if I'm Kohl's, I'm worried. It is a very unpleasant shopping experience. So yeah, I actually think this is not a great situation.
Well, Dan, you dropped out a little bit, but I think we got the gist of what you're saying. We're going to have to leave it there. Really appreciate you joining us on the program this morning, and we look forward to having you back again very soon. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears, talk about real estate. Joining us on the line, he's the real estate reporter for Market Watch. We're talking about Jacob Hasse. Jacob, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Glad to be here.
So, kind of some rough weather heading up the Northeast. I know, talking to my folks in Baltimore, a lot of rain in the D.C. metro area. It's going to find its way up into New England. And I know you want to talk a little bit about hurricane and flood insurance and things like that. So what's top of mind for that this week?
Yeah. So, we are deep in the midst of hurricane season. And this is kind of, the meteorological experts kind of refer to this as the hurricane season within a season. So hurricane season runs from June through November, but this is the time of year where you usually see the most storms and the strongest storms. And we're kind of right in the midst of that. Tropical storm Fred made landfall last week and went up in Florida and then traveled up the Appalachians and upstate New York, causing torrential downpours, lots of flooding, and now we've got another tropical storm or perhaps even a hurricane headed for New England that should make landfall most likely, Sunday, Monday. Folks listening right now might be feeling the effects. It's a good time of year to revisit your homeowner's insurance policy because hurricanes are unusual when it comes to homeowners insurance and what is covered and what is not. They are not like a lot of other types of natural disasters, and that's because of all the different ways that they can create damage, which I'm happy to go into for listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's lay it on us.
Yeah, so, the standard homeowners insurance policy will cover damage for a range of reasons. Fires, they usually cover wind-related damage. But what they don't cover is flooding, and they also don't cover what are called earth movements. In other words, earthquakes. So if you're in California listening, you probably know you need a separate earthquake policy. But they also don't cover flooding. And a lot of people, if you live in a flood zone, you'll know that because you'll be required to get flood insurance for your home. Usually if you have a mortgage lender, they'll require you to hold flood insurance. But if you don't live in a flood zone, you may not have thought of purchasing it. But here's the issue is even if you don't live in a flood zone, if flooding causes damage to your home, that won't be covered by your homeowner's insurance. So let's put it this way. If there's a hurricane coming and your roof is damaged, then water is leaking from the roof, it'll probably be covered. But if the storm drain on your block gets clogged and leads to localized flooding, not talking about like a river overrunning or storm surge even, just talking about there was a lot of rainfall and the storm drain got clogged and that caused flooding, well, that won't be covered unless you have a flood insurance policy. So, and a lot of Americans don't realize this. There was a study done by the insurance website Policy Genius last year, and they found that over half of homeowners thought that their standard home insurance policy covered flood damage, and they don't. And so, insurance experts, I spoke with one who gave a great quote. He said, "If it rains where you live, you should buy flood insurance." And it's something that people.
Sorry, that is funny.
It's something that people overlook, but it's really important. And hurricanes, they get even more complicated because some states Florida is a good example, perhaps the perfect example. Because hurricanes are so common in the state of Florida, there's also, you sometimes have to get additional windstorm coverage, and that will be true in a lot of coastal states on the East Coast because of the likelihood of tropical storms and hurricanes. So like I said, standard home insurance usually covers wind damage, but you might need to get separate coverage if you live in a hurricane-prone area. And then oftentimes along the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, if you live in those regions, you need to have a separate hurricane deductible as part of your policy. And so what that means is basically, you have the standard deductible that you pay out. It's money that you pay up front before the insurance kicks in. With a hurricane deductible, it's a little different. Rather than it being a set dollar amount that you have to cover before insurance kicks in, it is a percentage, and it's going to be a percentage of your home's insured value. So that could be anywhere from 1% to 10%. That's the general range. And it'll be higher in areas where hurricanes are more likely and lower, obviously, in areas where that is not the case. So, depending on where you live, you might already have one of these built into your policy. Folks in New England, kind of not a region that we think of a lot with hurricanes, so they're probably not having to be worried too much about that in these coming weeks, but it's just something to look out for. The other thing I went into in this story, and a thing that I think people don't think to do, is doing the inventory in advance. And here's what I mean by that. So some family friends of mine had a horrible situation a few years ago where lightning struck their home and it caused a fire, and they lost pretty much everything.
Oh, no.
It was really awful. And what they learned the hard way is that you really need to have like an actual inventory of what you own for insurance to be able to cover it. They need proof of your belongings and everything, the whole 9 yards. So if you do a home renovation, if let's say you redid your master bathroom, know how much that cost you in addition to whatever you paid for the home, because that's money you'll probably want to get back if you ever want to make a master bedroom the way it was storm damage or whatever the situation might be. And this is true for anything, not just hurricanes. But you really need to do an inventory of what you own and how much it costs, and keep track of that. A lot of insurance companies now offer apps where you can kind of make that list in the app. And so it's good to have that, because when you go to file a claim, then you'll have a really strong sense of how much everything costs you, so that you can, do it easier with the insurance adjusters and get the money you're actually owed. It's also good from year to year when you go to renew. If you have a set inventory of what you did, renovations you undertook, et cetera, when you have that list, it actually helps you figure out what insurance coverage you need, because you don't want to have too much coverage because then you're paying too much, but you also don't want to have too little, because then when disaster strikes, you're not going to get the money you need. So, I think that people sometimes think about buying insurance where they buy it and then they're like, that's it, I'm good. But there are other steps that you need to take to make sure that your insurance is working for you correctly.
And I got to think, Jacob, if for these first-time home buyers out there, if you can find a home, this has got to be uncharted territory for them. They can make some real mistakes, and if they make those mistakes, it could cost them down the line.
Totally. It seems like just another item on your checklist when you're buying a home, just something you need to get done and not worry too much about. And you're probably also thinking of it from a cost saving standpoint. You don't want to spend too much, and I get that. You want to make sure you're getting a competitive rate and all that. What you don't want to do is spend so little that you're not actually getting the coverage you need. And you want to make sure that you're getting, if there are add-ons, you might think, well, I don't want to spend that extra money. But who knows when the state of Massachusetts will be hit by a hurricane, and that could be happening, right as we speak. So it goes to show that you can't, with insurance, it pays to be prepared. And yes, you might be spending money now that you're not going to. It only kicks in when disaster strikes, but who's to say disaster is not going to strike? And this is setting aside, forget about hurricanes. There's always the little things, the pipe that burst in the winter, or the iron that was left like curling iron that was left plugged in the bathroom that caused a little fire. All those little things that can happen in day-to-day life, they cause damage, and you need the right insurance to cover it. So, doing these, in the context of hurricanes and storm damage and stuff like that, it's important to understand where you are covered, but it's also important to make sure that you have the coverage you need.
Jacob, is there a time of year that is better than another to re-look at your insurance coverages? I mean, we talk about car insurance, we talk about healthcare insurance and dental insurance and eye insurance, eye coverage. Is there, we do those open enrollments every year. We rethink about where we're spending money, what we need and what we don't need. Is there a good time of year to do this, or is it just, hey, I just got the bug and I'm going to go do it?
I think there's not necessarily a right or a wrong time to do it. I think a lot of people just do it based on, you usually have to get your insurance lined up before you purchase the home, obviously. Mm-hmm. So it'll just be, kind of on a schedule like that when, they'll renew each year from then on forward. One thing to keep in mind, though, with timing and going back to hurricanes is, insurance companies have protections in place because they don't want a ton of people to just go out and get flood insurance right before there's about to be a hurricane hitting their town. So, insurance companies will put moratoriums on issuing new policies during those periods of time once there's a named storm, basically, during hurricane season. Once it receives a name and has, a trajectory, they will, usually issue a moratorium on issuing new policies in that area because they don't want to suddenly have extra liability that's about to, actually be impacted. Mm-hmm. Similarly, there's usually, when you get a new insurance policy, there's usually kind of a waiting period before it actually kicks in. You usually get it, and then sometimes it's, 30 days or so before all the coverage kicks in. And that's just important to know because you want to, be safer during that time, but also, if you're buying insurance this time of year, well, 30 days from now, there could, hurricanes come and go pretty quickly. So 30 days from now, there could be a number of new storms that have happened or happen. So, you want to make sure that when you're purchasing the coverage, you get the most coverage from the get-go. Talk to your insurance company that you're thinking of working with, find out when it kicks in exactly, so you have a sense of what to be prepared for.
Really good idea. The things that maybe a lot of people hadn't thought about, and certainly this is the time to rethink all of your insurance needs. Jacob Passy, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us as always. Really insightful information. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. We're going to close the show out on a very quick look at the markets, and you know him as the lead anchor from the TD Ameritrade Network. We're talking about Oliver Rennick. Oliver, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, so let's dive in because we've got so much going on geopolitically. We've got a lot of stuff going on in the markets. Why don't you give us your thoughts of what has transpired over the last 7 to 8 days?
So we've had a few big developments that in nature are, pretty important, pretty noteworthy in terms of the market reaction. A fairly small decline in the market over the last 10 days. But again, it's just hard to really mount any downside in U.S. stocks when investors routinely buy dips led by technology companies. But we did get some important things. And one, obviously, we got a little kind of surprise, geopolitical shock with the Afghanistan situation, but don't really think that is a major role, frankly, if any, in markets. The last this week or 2 weeks has really been about investors getting a better idea of the Fed's timeline for removing some of the crisis level stimulus. And from the language in the minutes this week, as well as the continuing kind of drumbeat from Fed governors outside Powell, it's becoming clear that this is something likely to happen by the end of this year. That is the slow, gradual tapering of asset purchases. But we don't have that confirmed. So even though this is definitely playing a role in the market and as it should. It's a very big deal. Without Powell really telling us explicitly what timeline he's thinking about, the market still is quite confident that they are going to take things very, very slowly. So the setup for next weekend at Jackson Hole is very much centered around this potential for clarity from Jay Powell. But until we really hear it from the horse's mouth, it's hard to mount any real downside in the equity market when investors have become just so accustomed to accommodation from the Fed. So, I mean, that's the big one that in my mind is generally still the most important thing that's happening in markets, which is liquidity in markets and the rate at which that changes, which is very much affected by tapering timeline. But the other big thing happening is a huge bear market in Chinese stocks that has just completely destroyed that entire equity market. And it's pretty incredible. Part of it is self-induced by the Chinese government through regulation, but it's certainly something investors can't lose sight of because these are some of the most disruptive tech in the world, and they're just getting totally destroyed. So that, too, is potentially telling us something about growth in a post-COVID world for some of these tech companies and stocks, and it should definitely be a yellow flag to investors.
You mentioned Jackson Hole. Is Jay Powell going to be offer any clarity, real clarity, or are we going to get kind of the same? Yeah, it could be this, it could be that. Kind of tempered responses or tempered statements.
I think we're at the point where Powell needs to be a little bit more clear. I think that he has been able to thread a needle very artfully so far in the recovery, but we are at the point where the market desires some degree of clarity, and it probably warrants a fair amount of clarity as well, given that we have made a good bit of progress in the economy. It does not so far meet their definition of substantial progress, as we saw from the Fed minutes, but it is progress enough to perhaps cause a wind down of some of these asset purchasing programs. Now, that doesn't mean rate hikes. So these are two separate things, though. So Powell could easily say that, look, we haven't made substantial progress to hike rates, but we have made enough progress to start pulling back some of our support for the market. And with so much leading up to it, it just would be pretty surprising if Powell was preparing an innocuous speech right now. I think it's either going to be he will confirm that December is the start date for tapering, or he'll go the other way and truly be that extreme dove and tell everyone, no, the governors around me are wrong. The voting members are right now, not on the same page as me, and I have no interest in withdrawing that stimulus. So both of those events would be notable events, and I tend to err on the side that he's likely to err slightly on the hawkish side.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I know where we can check it out, and that's on the TD Ameritrade Network with Oliver Rennick, Markets on the Close and Morning Trade Live. Oliver, it's great for you to stop by. Really appreciate it. I know how busy you are, but
Thanks,
have a
Jeff.
great rest of the
Absolutely.
weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Okay, you too. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
buddy. Bye-bye. That wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow, this time for BRN AM. We'll have another great special guest. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.